On a supermoto, it is either about pushing or riding hang-off. But which method is actually the better one? Today we are here at the Supermoto track close to Vienna at a Supermoto training session. I have learned both methods and tried to push them to the limit. And what that looked like, you are about to find out now. I come very strongly from the supersport and superbike background. That means I am used to street motorcycles, where by nature your riding style always involves hang-off riding. With supermoto, things are a bit different. Here, pushing the bike or using the so-called pushing system actually has advantages in certain situations. And how and where you should best use each method, that is what we are going to look at now. With hanging off, the advantage is very clear. The rider hangs much further into the lean angle than the motorcycle itself. And because of that, the motorcycle has less lean angle relative to the ground than the overall package. This naturally has the advantage that the tire is not stressed as much on the extreme edge, but more on the shoulder area where the middle lateral tread begins. And that means I can find more grip. Perfected, you can of course see this in MotoGP racing, where riders try to shift the entire body weight to the inside, sometimes even with their elbows on the ground. The goal is to get as much weight to the inside as possible so that the motorcycle itself stays more upright. So why do we then see this other riding style so often in supermoto, where the bike is pushed into the corner, hence the name pushing system or pushing riding style? Why do so many riders do this? Well, both systems have their advantages and disadvantages. We already mentioned the advantage of hanging off, but pushing also has one decisive advantage. Especially when it comes to riding very tight radii or hairpin corners, I am simply more flexible and quicker through the corner when pushing. This is particularly true when there is also a direction change involved. You can imagine that if I wanted to ride both corners with hang-off, I would have to move myself and the motorcycle from one side to the other. That naturally happens much more sluggishly and slowly than if I stay upright on top of the bike and only lean the motorcycle underneath me from a left-hand corner into a right-hand corner. And here we already see that there are situations where this riding style absolutely makes sense. In addition, when I stay more upright on the bike and do not lean in as deeply, I need less physical effort compared to when I have to work with my entire body. And that, of course, is also less tiring. One small disadvantage of this pushing riding style, however, is that I can no longer keep my foot on the foot peg. Otherwise, it would start scraping, because this method creates significantly more lean angle of the motorcycle than I, as part of the overall package, do myself. And that is why I always have to lift my foot. You can see it very clearly. You then slide back a little, because at high lean angles, the foot is always in the way. For long-legged riders, it can even go so far that the knee hits the handlebar. That is why you then have to slide further back to be able to pull the foot up enough. But for that, you need good thigh muscles so that you can sustain this over longer periods of time. Depending on how long you are riding, races do last a certain amount of time. If you are not trained, it can happen very quickly that you get cramps in your thigh. So where do I use which system? Which of these two riding styles is actually faster? That depends very much on the conditions and on personal habits. If I come from the racetrack and from street motorcycles, I will probably find it easier to use the hang-off style, where I also shift some weight to the inside. If I come more from motocross, I am not used to that, nor to these grip conditions, and I often find pushing easier. That is already the first decision. Which style feels easier for me personally, and then I try to make that riding style work. In general, which one is better also depends on the conditions. If I have a track that does not have extremely tight corners, but rather nicely flowing radii with a lot of grip, then I have an advantage with the hang-off style. By leaning my body inward, I do not stress the tire as much, and it can really use the grippy surface to generate a strong interlocking effect that gives me a somewhat higher corner speed. When accelerating out of the corner, it also helps me automatically, because I still have my upper body on the inside of the motorcycle. Due to acceleration and the inertia of my body, I actually pull the motorcycle further into the corner. Or when accelerating out, I can hold my line better. And that is one of the most decisive advantages of hanging off. If I have a very small course with hairpins or extreme direction changes at very low speeds, then the pushing riding style often has clear advantages. As I mentioned before, you are simply much quicker at tipping the bike over and more flexible, especially in slow corners. These slow corners are sometimes ridden at only around 30 kilometers per hour, and there it is all about maintaining balance better with the motorcycle. It is not so much about exploring the absolute limit, but about getting through these tight sections in a controlled and balanced way. And there, the more upright riding style makes things a bit easier for me. So these two methods exist. Which one is better for you? You will have to find out by experiencing and trying it yourself. I have now laid out the basic principles for you once again, and I wish you a lot of fun experimenting. And with that, I say goodbye, bye-bye, and see you next time.